Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the House Committee on General and Housing. Today is Wednesday, the 26th of February, and our first item will be H57, an act relating to survivor benefits. And we're just having a walk through the start with Sophie Batney, our legislative. Sophie, take it away.
Thank you. Sophie Zadatny from the Office of Legislative Counsel for the record. And today we're looking at a strike all amendment to H57. This is essentially adopts the version of H695 that came through the House last year. There's a couple of changes to it. So one is that it adds that the Treasurer's Office has up to a year to pay out a monetary award. Otherwise, it's essentially the same bill that came out of the House last year. Compared to the original H57 bill that you looked at previously, the changes in this one expand coverage to include the survivor corrections officers in addition to law enforcement officers. And it has expanded definitions of child, domestic partner, and spouse.
So you do remember that several of us here were not here last year.
Right. I know the committee has talked extensively about the bill from last year. But, so the strike all amendment essentially to go back to the version of the bill that was adopted, went through the House last year. So just going in turn. So again, Section 1, the act may be cited as Jessica's law. Jessica was a Rutland City Police officer that died in the line of duty in July of 2023. Section 2 is looking at the definitions. And again, the definitions in the strike all amendment are a significantly expanded definition on some of the family relationships. So child here is defined to include biological children, foster children, adopted children, stepchildren, legal wards, children for whom the deceased had day-to-day responsibilities to care for and financially support when the child was under the age of 18. The strike all also includes definitions for correctional officers. It refers to a statutory provision, 28 VSA Section 3. And that definition is that any person who is an employee of the Department of Corrections, whose official duties or job classification includes the supervision or monitoring of a person on parole, probation, or serving any sentence of incarceration, whether inside or outside a correctional facility, and who has received training as approved by the Commissioner of Corrections. A domestic partner, again, an expanded definition with a number of factors for what constitutes a domestic partner. The definitions of firefighter and emergency personnel are the same ones that are currently in the statute. They're just moved around. Law enforcement officer is the same definition that was in the original H57. Line of duty, and again, very similar to the original H57 bill that you were working on, but now it adds in the line of duty for correctional officers. And that includes supervision or monitoring of inmates in a correctional facility, supervision or monitoring of one or more persons serving a sentence of incarceration outside a correctional facility, or supervising or monitoring a person on parole or probation. The occupation-related illness is unchanged, and then parent also has an expanded definition, as was passed last year. Spouse includes domestic partner or civil union partner, and then volunteer personnel is the same definition as the one that is in the current statute. The strike all amendment does include changes to the Emergency Personnel Survivors Benefit Review Board. These changes are different to the changes that were recommended in the H57, the original bill. In this version, it eliminates the member of the public appointed by the governor and would add the chair of the Law Enforcement Advisory Board or designee and the Commissioner of Corrections or designee to the board. So it would go from being a 4-person board to a 5-person board. Under H57, the board would have been renamed and you would have added the executive director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council as well as another member of the public. So that's a significant switch from H57.
Go over that one more time.
Yeah, so under H57, which was the bill that originally was in front of the committee, the proposal was to to rename the board. So it wouldn't have been emergency personnel. It would have included law enforcement in the title of the board.
Mhm.
And it was to add the executive director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, and then an additional member of the public to represent the interests of law enforcement officers. So that was in the original H57. The strike all goes back to what was passed last year. And the change is removing the current member of the public
Yeah.
that's appointed by the governor, and then adding the chair of the Law Enforcement Advisory Board and the Commissioner of Corrections. So removing one and adding two. But it's a different mix than what was in the original H57.
So no member of the public?
So no member of the public in this version.
That's in part because it's something of an ad hoc board. So a member of the public may be appointed and then the board may not convene for like 5 years. Hopefully.
Right.
And so we thought that removing that would make it more cogent. So that a person isn't called 5 years down the road to.
Right. Because you couldn't convene without that member.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a good edit.
In addition, in the strike all amendment, again, this is on page 5, section 3172, subsection A2, provides that when someone has died in the line of duty, the survivors have 18 months after the death of the emergency personnel to request the benefit. So it puts in a time that's not in the current statute. It retains that the board has 60 days after receipt of all the information to make a decision. And then it adds that the treasurer shall have up to 1 year from the date the claim is received to disperse the funds. And that's an additional change over the version that was last year's version. And that's because of the issue that the committee has heard about in terms of the fund and the amount of money in the fund and needing additional time to replenish the fund. So it gives the treasurer more flexibility in issuing the. And then the final change is taking out that the member of the public, as we just touched on, so the per diem language can come out. And then just a technical correction on the monetary benefit, just to clear up the language on that. And then this adds in, which was the first amendment to H57 the committee had looked at, adds in the language around if the balance of the fund is insufficient to pay out and the General Assembly is not in session, that the emergency board may transfer funds into the account.
Can I ask a question about we got rid of the per diem language. Is there any financing of the board remaining? Like, is the board paid?
So it would just be considered part
Part
of
of
the
their
normal
work.
duties, yeah.
Well, look, I think that this is a phenomenal legislation. I'm proud to sponsor once again. I really appreciate committee members' time making it stronger and the work that went into that and some of the fine tuning. So I'm looking forward to supporting this bill once again and hopefully seeing it past the finish line.
Questions of Sophie? Yes.
Yeah, as many of you know, Raprazo and I worked really hard last year to get this passed, and in the last minute, it was kind of yanked out in the Senate. I do have some concerns about expanding it to elections officers, and I want to know what that conversation sounded like. And if those who worked on that expansion could share their thoughts would be helpful. So not necessarily for Sophie, but it's something I would like to know how that conversation went.
I can right now, in the middle of a conversation, but when we get to a break, I'll find the part of the discussion from that last year. Because it was discussed
It was
last year.
discussed here.
Yeah,
Sure, I mean, I think my feelings for this last year were the same, that I didn't necessarily feel that this should be expanded to correctional officers, and looking at this as for first responders. And my understanding of how the treasurer's office is looking at this is they're already concerned with the expansion to law enforcement. And so I think this additional expansion, I do have some concerns over that, and I don't think this year, at least, we've taken testimony. So like I said, I do have concerns.
Go ahead, Lenore.
Can I ask about, when we're talking about the definition of the corrections, does it include, all the folks that are like nonprofit, or like, that Vermont Works for Women, or, the folks that are, I don't know if they're contracted or what the wording is for the people that go in and give services like classes or other instruction or.
The definition, we went over this extensively.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's not. Of course, I totally understand. Sophie, do you have the definition of correction officer?
I think it's in here.
Okay,
It's,
Well, this is the first 28
it's
years.
employees of the Department of Corrections, and it refers to a statutory provision, but the definition in that statutory provision is any person who's an employee of the Department of Corrections, whose official duties or job classification includes the supervision or monitoring of a person on parole, probation, or serving any sentence of incarceration, whether inside or outside of a correctional facility, and who has received training as approved by the Commissioner of Corrections. So I don't think it would apply. I mean, it wouldn't apply to.
So it would have to say or contractor.
yeah, this is strictly for, and if anyone's spent a fair amount of time in prisons, as I have, not in let the record show, but I spend a lot of time at our women's facility in South Burlington and in my other job. And these folks are on the front lines, similar to law enforcement, doing the work, dealing with the issues. And I believe we could also look at the record showing that our committee voted unanimously on this last time.
It did, am I right? Did get,
Yeah.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I think something that has obviously shown itself is that a committee from a different biennium worked on this language, not this committee.
Right.
We started new every 2 years. And yeah, I mean, we just have, it's something that we haven't taken any test, we haven't done anything on other than say it was in another bill, which is neither here nor there on the, the value of adding that, but just a process thing of we haven't taken any testimony on that. And secondly, my only thought is with adding, I mean, it's a lengthy period, adding that 18-month window. Sounds like they're pretty flexible in understanding as to somebody making the claim down the road. And I don't know how far down the road they're open to. I don't know if it's in any of their rules or law anywhere. I'm just worried that now that we put a set timeline on it, at 19 months, somebody would get denied, whereas the flexibility exists now to say, oh, those are your circumstances, understandable, absolutely not a problem. But just adding that, I wouldn't be in favor of doing that, just want to allow them the flexibility. Yeah, those would be my two things.
Just a couple questions with regard, again, to the section defining who is eligible. Fish and wildlife officers, game wardens, are they included in law enforcement officers? What does that encompass?
The law enforcement officer, are those that have been certified by the Vermont Criminal Justice Council pursuant to section 2358. I believe it would cover
It
them.
would, yeah.
That's sworn officers, yeah.
I haven't made my mind up really as to what my thoughts are on correctional officers. Yes, it's a tense place to be. what I would hope to see is some really clear delineation between who we're providing this to and the rest of the world. So if we call this emergency services, which I think is, all right, emergency personnel is emergency personnel, and understanding that, you know, we're not going to put a lot of legal arguments on the name of the bill, but incarceration is not an emergency. So setting that precedent, are we looking down the road possibly at many more additions to the list that are not necessarily emergency personnel? Logging is dangerous, farming is dangerous, you know, there's a lot of other in some instances, teaching.
Well, this is limited to state employees. In other words, this is a state program benefit.
All right.
Yeah, so, but I mean, I guess, yes,
So
there could be,
if there's some definition.
well, here, there's a definition that it's enumerated. And here, what people are covered is actually listed. Where is that something?
Yeah, it's listed, it's subsection 7, page 2, going on to page 3. Lists who emergency personnel are defined as for purposes of this chapter. So structurally, under H57, it was the emergency personnel plus law enforcement. So those changes were made sort of throughout the bill. And then the structure of this one is somewhat different. What it does is it just takes that definition of emergency personnel and then folds the other people into it. So then it just uses emergency personnel as the short term for that.
What I'm anticipating is, as impossible as it is to do so, committees and sessions down the road saying, well, this looks like a place where we could add this and add that and add this and add that.
I mean, that can happen
So-
with any bill.
Right.
One, I want to just throw out one thing, as I remember in the testimony we received, which wasn't on this draft, but was on the concept. I think there was discussion of the amount of money in the fund, and they asked for an appropriation, as I remember, of
20,000.
20,000. That's not in this bill, right?
It's in the Budget Adjustment Act.
Oh, it is?
Plus the
Okay, great, okay. Huh,
So-
yeah,
Say one more thing.
go ahead.
Very passionate about this, obviously. So for me, this is a policy decision and we make policy decisions all the time. Can't know what the future holds, but for me, this is a matter of feeling that the folks that are on the front lines in our Department of Corrections are valued and serve our communities in a way that is very challenging. And so, well, you know, that is something that we discussed with many bills. I have another bill in another committee right now with similar concern of if we add this person to a protective class, assault on transit workers, that then it keeps going. And I completely understand that. For me, and again, I understand the process concerns from members as well, that we didn't take testimony from folks in DOC and other things this biennium. I'm happy to, you know, see how the committee feels if that's something, again, chair can decide, but if folks are split on that issue and want to take that up, that's fine too. But that's where I stand, that I personally feel that are just as valued in the work.
I'm just gonna
I know, I just want to, we have scheduled this for another 5 minutes. We can hear it or schedule it for a later time, although between now and Friday, our time is pretty compressed. I guess I have 2 questions for the committee. One is, in this form, as it is right now, how many people feel comfortable with the bill as it is now and could vote for it?
Right on the line.
Okay.
One more, I think another question.
Okay, please ask. I'm just trying to get a sense. And Joe, you didn't raise your hand. What if we took out the 18 months? That make any
What's
difference?
that? No, I think it's a good change, I believe, but I don't know, it's a whole lot of language to say like,
So you.
just because I was here last year.
Yeah, you're. feeling
I'm,
like you
I'm personally
want more
thinking
testimony.
of others who
Like
haven't
some
gone through this
testimony.
entire conversation
Okay,
and treating it as if like, oh, we talked about this.
Right,
We all
okay.
agreed on it. It's like, okay.
I'm on the line because I'm, on the one hand, I wish we had more time to hear more. On the other hand, I don't want to risk putting this off for further discussion and then nothing happens. I think it's important. I'm worried about the slippery slope somewhat, but I suppose when, if the definitions are clear and we're saying it's state employees, then I guess that makes sense.
Did talk about. This. It's not.
yeah, we can talk about this tomorrow, but we've got to decide.
Who we want to hear.
This
we
has
want-
just gone on and on.
Yeah, we can talk about it tomorrow because this was just a walkthrough. We can talk about it tomorrow, but I think that's what I'm trying to suss out. So what I'm hearing Joe say is, yeah, it would help to take out the 18 months, but you're a little concerned that we haven't heard anything and you'd be more comfortable if we heard at least a witness on this draft rather than discuss the draft.
Yeah, there's that. Just remembering what I think ended this from coming through last session partially.
Well, we do have, I want to say two things. One, remember, with legislation, the enemy of the good is the perfect.
Yeah.
For what it's worth. And yes, we always face slippery slopes. I'm not advocating one way or the other. It's just a fact. But the second is, last year, it died in the Senate because they added a lot of stuff.
Yes,
Is that what
I
happened?
wanted to add more people.
And there is a Senate bill that has made it over out of the Senate into the House yesterday, which is on our wall, which we can either hear or not hear. But I think you guys I gave it to you to look at. Is it broader than that?
Right.
It is, it adds on, social workers.
So, it is on psychiatric social workers or something like that, because there wasn't, it was just killed. And I think, is it anything else?
It's S89.
Yeah,
Yeah, it adds, yeah, and then Family Services Division of the Department for Children and Families, and then workers, employees in state psychiatric hospitals and therapeutic. I don't remember the exact language, but it does expand it further.
To the members of the committee that are wavering, I'm happy to also provide you, I spent time with correction officers in their meeting, hundreds of them, that they have a meeting, just with the gratitude of caring and thinking about them in this way as well. So I'm happy to connect you all to those folks who are deeply grateful for the work of the committee coming out as a unanimous vote on this issue.
Okay.
yes.
So
I'm not wavering about whether correction officers should be included. My concern is then who else should be included that also puts themselves in harm's way when they're at work. So where does it stop? Where does it begin? And where does it stop? Firefighters and
They're in.
police
They're
officers.
already in there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but now adding correction officers, they're not running into a fire. But I understand where you're coming from, but then there's other people in other professions also that put themselves at risk.
They work for the state. This is only the state.
That work for the state.
Okay, I think we're out of time. What I think we need to do, we'll hear this tomorrow. We have to think about, and I'd ask, I guess, Mary and Elizabeth, if we wanted to hear a little testimony, not too much, who would it be? Who could testify on this? And I also, we don't have to do an appropriations. I do want to ask one thing. The only solution, I mean, ordinarily, I would say if you're worried about that it could be expanded, ordinarily the approach I would advocate taking is just start somewhere. Do it and see what happens. And then if it has to be expanded, you expand it. In other words, it's not like we only do this once, and just start somewhere without saying where the somewhere is. But I don't see an alternative to that other than something like setting up a process. In other words, you pass this bill and you provide that the board has to make recommendations whether there are additional personnel who work for the state who are frequently in harm's way, and make that recommendation back to this committee, in the fall.
I think Mary has a question.
This bill is very, very important to me. We worked very hard on this last year. It passed here unanimously. Everyone voted for it. It passed on the floor unanimously. There was a mix-up in the Senate. It should not prevent this bill from going through. I have neighbors who are correctional officers, and I wish you could speak to them. Their job is difficult. When you work for the state, every job is, you're in harm's way every day. As legislators, we're in harm's way every day, getting threats, etc. You walk in the shoes of a correctional officer and their families. And I am very disappointed that this has gotten to this point. I really would like to see this bill passed. The people that voted for it last time, I don't know why you wouldn't consider it this time. But that is my feeling on this.
I'm not saying I'm not voting for this, but I think we need to look back at the makeup of what the last 2 years have been, and the ability for members in this committee who have sat on this committee to actually share their thoughts. Same goes on the floor in both bodies. And I think with the process that Vermonters deserve, I understand and I respect how much you care about this, but I think we also deserve to have our thoughts heard as well. And that's why I brought it up. I've had people come to me and say, why are you expanding this? And that's why I brought it up. And that's my right as a legislator, as a representative, to represent the people from my committees. And that's why I asked. And so I don't think that we can be beholden to the past because we've had those conversations. Things change, questions come up. We have conversations with other constituents who say, hey, have you thought about this?
I think what I'm going to do, considering that we're done for now, we're going to hear this tomorrow. And unless something radical happens, I'm going to bring it to a vote. And if it passes out of committee, I vote unanimously, great. If it doesn't, if it passes out of committee on a divided vote, so be it. If it passes out of committee, it doesn't pass out, so be it. In other words, I respect what I've heard today, that people would like a little more time and perhaps a little more testimony. We'll see what we can do. And I think we should make a decision tomorrow. Because if we delay much longer, I think we risk not getting it out in time is our problem. And hey, remember, it's got to go to the floor. And it's got to go to the floor as well. So thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
I think if we have a discussion, if anybody has any ideas for things they'd like to change, other than Joe, you're taking out the 18 months, that's easy. We can do that or not do that by just in our discussion. If someone has some substantial addition they want to make, they should ask Sophie to draft something. I'm just saying, so it's there. And Sophie, if that happens, you'll have to be there for that part of the discussion. If it doesn't, it's up to us now. It's a policy choice. We got to make it. Okay,
I will wait for the discussion tomorrow.
all right.
It's just a very
Okay.
simple.
Thank you, Sophie, and let us move on.
No, no, go ahead. Like, all right, I think it's safe.
Okay. All right,
Is there more of these from around or?
are you Connor?
Oh, here.
Is there an extra?
Everybody's got
That was an extra one.
Oh.
Each side of the amount of same.
Thank you. Connor, I think you've met this, have you met this committee?
Not everyone.
Okay, would you introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Connor Timmons. I'm the executive director at Home Care Vermont. I've corresponded with some of you, I think, and some of you I've known for a little while. And I think in the notes that I sent along, there's a PowerPoint somewhere, but I don't know if that's going to be something you look at later or we have the ability to play that here, but I don't know.
Generally, we ask the witness to present it, so I'll send you the Zoom link.
Oh, okay. Didn't get that yet. Let me get that.
Let's have the committee introduce.
Great.
I'm Ashley Bartley. I work at Fairfax in the majority of Georgia.
Nora Dodge, I serve Essex Town in the city of Essex Junction.
Joe Parsons, Newberry, Topsom, and Groton.
Tom Charlton, Athens, Chester, Grafton, Wyndham.
Debbie Dolgan, I represent St. Johnsbury, Concord, and Kirby. Yeah, that's all. I represent Chittenden and 20 Colchester.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows. I represent Windsor One, which is Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
You just get to the.
Tell us your name for the record. And
Oh,
I'm Mark Motley. I represent Callis, Marshfield, and Plainfield. And you want to tell us your name for the record?
My name is Connor Timmons and I'm the executive director at Home Share.
Okay, go ahead, please.
And here we go. I'll just pull this up. Okay. Great. So Home Share Vermont is a very simple mission. We are a screening and matching program that matches folks with extra space in their homes with people who are looking for affordable housing here in the state of Vermont. It's a pretty simple model. Folks with extra room, we call them hosts, and I'll refer to them as hosts and guests throughout the presentation today. Hosts offer reduced rent, so well below market rent. Our maximum rent is $650 in exchange for some service each week. So it's a maximum of 12 hours of service each week. And that service might include something like snow shoveling or help with taking out the trash or walking the dogs, or we can go along and enumerate them all. There's a lot. I'm sure you can think of many that would be helpful for your household. I've thought of many for mine as well. And that does not include personal care. I think I want to make that very clear. So this is sort of household support, household care, things that would help you keep up your house or stay in your house safely is the goal. It is an aging in place program from its inception. We have been doing this for over 40 years. And so we're very confident in the model. We've rarefied it to a point that we think it is a nice balance of efficiency and thoroughness and intentionality. And I think you'll see that as we talk about this throughout the presentation today. This is our current service area. So as you can see, we kind of cut Windsor in half and we touch into the Northeast Kingdom. We call them our test balloons, our 3 test city or towns in the Northeast Kingdom. So that's Craftsbury, Greensboro, and Hardwick. And that has mostly to do with where we position our case managers. We have a case manager who happens to live in Wolcott. So that's kind of how that worked out. We wanted to try our hand in those counties last biennium we started that. And so I can report back a little bit about that. Similarly, in Windsor County, we expanded last time, and that was based on a partnership with the Thompson Senior Center in Woodstock. Those were both sort of trial products, and we're going to talk a little bit about the results and why we want to move forward with those same models right now. But I do want to take a minute to just go through what's behind the scenes, under the hood, a little bit of how it actually works, because I think there's a lot of questions. On paper, it seems like a very efficient thing, and it is. But I think when you get into the details, you start to understand a little more how it works. So this is how our process works. An application comes in, it can be on paper, it can be online. We've integrated a new database that allows us to move much quicker and faster and allowed for a lot more remote work, which is nice. We immediately will do background and reference checks. So we do 6 background checks all told throughout the whole process, and 3 reference checks for each individual, whether they're a host or a guest. So this is both sides of the equation here. After which we do 2 interviews, but one of them is sort of just a, hey, how are you interview and make sure how serious someone is, very short. The other one is an hour and a half. It's a very in-depth interview. And if we are interviewing a host, we will do that at their home. So we often say we're interviewing the host and we're also kind of interviewing the home. Is this a home that is suitable for someone to live in? There are a lot of homes in Vermont that are on the 2nd floor where no one has been for a little while. And maybe a window is not as closed as we thought it could be, or maybe, things change in old houses. We know that. So sometimes those are meetings that result in referrals to other organizations like Efficiency Vermont or other organizations like that, that might be able to help get the house back up to where it needs to be in order to make it livable for someone else. So these are things that can happen. But it's not sort of part of our mandate, but it's something that we do on the side. At which point, once someone has passed the reference checks and the interview and everything seems copacetic, we will do an introduction. And that takes a little while between those 2 phases. So those, we've basically put everyone in a matching pool and make sure that there's some commonality. So we want to know, what are people interested in, right down to the reality television shows that they favor, the music they prefer, their habits, their hobbies, pets, everything that we can possibly know within reason, so that we can make a good match. And oftentimes those commonalities start with, this is my favorite kind of tea, and all of a sudden we're talking about Downton Abbey or whatever it is. And that tends to work really well for us. We've noticed a good habit with that, and our matchmakers are getting more and more adept at that. And we've got several who've been there for a very long time and are quite good at that process. After which there's a trial period, which I think is the secret sauce. But really, like, to me, that would be the really differentiates us and makes us much better than any app or any kind of website you'd ever find out there. And that's 2 weeks where no one gives up a lease, where people can go back to wherever they were living before, but it's a try. So if it's going well for 2 weeks, we know at the end of it. We'll often know pretty quickly if it's not going to go well, and then we end the match right then. There's no hard feelings. Everyone has a place to land. It's all worked out. If it is going well, though, at that point, we enter into a match agreement, which really outlines very specifically those details we talked about. So are we helping with shoveling? Are we helping walking the dog? Is it meal preparation? Is it transportation? All the things you can think about. And I'm sure if you think about some constituents, you can think of people who this would be helpful for, if only they could get to that, to that nighttime meeting, because they don't drive at night. If only they could get to those, those bone builders classes or whatever, but it's just hard for them to get there because they can't always get a ride from their neighbor, these kinds of things.
What causes the arrangement to end?
A variety of different things.
I noticed the duration is the average duration is slightly under 2 years.
Correct.
Why do they end?
A variety of reasons. I had a home share match at my house, and it was always finite. It was going to be 6 months, no matter what. No matter what. She was on her way to France. She had a spell of time where she needed to live here in Burlington, or in Vermont, excuse me. And she wanted to live in Burlington, but didn't work out. So it was always going to be 6 months. So that's one of the ways it's just always going to be that way. Oftentimes it is the needs of the host, push past what the home share arrangement can provide. But if it's giving them 2 extra years in their home, they're generally pretty grateful for that. Oftentimes that's the short duration for a waiting list for assisted living right now. So, we can do the math on that. Sometimes it's, every once in a while a host passes on while this arrangement is going on, and families are generally very grateful to have had a guest there during that process to make sure that, things can keep going at the house. And oftentimes we see guests that end up staying a little bit while they're figuring out the sale of the home, and make sure there's someone living in the house. If that happens someone passes on in November and they got all winter to figure it out, it's really nice to have someone living there rather than having to pay a property manager or what have you. I mean, we can go on and on, but, and then there are times when it's just someone, often it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, if I'm honest, someone all of a sudden wants to move in with the boyfriend or the girlfriend, or they're moving in or what have you. That can happen. And generally that changes the dynamic to the point where we're moving along. Things like that nature. And then I guess the other thing that I think is worth knowing is the ongoing support. So our case managers who do that matching don't just sort of, it's not a retail sales situation where we set you up and, all right, well, off you go. We are there checking in on a regular basis. So during that trial period, we're checking in a couple times during that trial period with both parties independently. During the first couple months of the match, we're checking in probably every couple weeks. It's a month, something like that. Every case is different. Some of them are higher needs, so we'll want to check in more. But there's at no point are they kind of on their own without anyone checking in. Even when they say, I'm done, leave me alone. We generally will check in at least, once a quarter or whatever to just touch base, even if it's email or text or what have you. So that keeps going, and that eases a lot of the stress around how those matches might end. So if someone is needing to move on and it's a stressful situation, we're there to kind of bridge that gap and make for a graceful exit. All of our agreements are 30-day notice as well. It's worth noting. So who's doing this? The age range is, I think, a lot wider than people expect. We actually don't have an age restriction on our matches. I would say that the vast majority are folks in the 65 plus age group, which for a variety of reasons, that's how it was designed. But as you heard, I am not 65 plus, and I was a host this past year, and hopefully will be a host in the next couple of weeks as well. For us, it's partially about dealing with a higher property tax than we budgeted for when we got our mortgage. And part of it is we have 2 little kids, and it's nice to have someone who's going to watch the 2 little kids. There it is. And also we understand how the market for rentals is really difficult in our neck of the woods. We're in Chittenden County, and any pressure we can pull off of that market, we're very happy to do. So as you can see, the age range is pretty wide. I will draw your attention to the low income measures. The vast majority of people using our service are categorized as low income based on HUD's reckoning. So I think that's just worth noting. This is helping people who don't have a lot of options. And we can talk about folks in that older age range as well in terms of their options in a bit. So what are they saying? You have the full data in your little handout that I gave you along with our most latest newsletter, but I thought it'd be worthwhile to talk a little bit about this. This is an annual survey that we do every year. Leonora, you might have been there around the first year that we did this. I'm not sure. This might have been your baby. Yeah, there you go. So this has been a very useful thing.
United Way wanted outcomes.
Yes, exactly. So we have really stuck to that results-based accountability model, and that's why our data is so clean. We had an 82% response rate for our survey last year, which is pretty high. 86% of hosts felt safer in their homes. That means a lot. To me, it says a lot, and I think that 80% enjoying their home more says even more. When you think about folks that are getting to that age and the house becomes a lot, and you hear people talk about that, the idea that they'd enjoy their home more at that phase, at that rate, says a lot about the quality of life or the changes in quality of life. And I think that's worth just noting. I wanted to talk a little bit about.
I think
Yes.
you've got about 7 more minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoa, okay.
I just want you to know.
Okay, I thought we had a little more time than that.
Let's
Let's get to it. Yeah.
What you need to get to is exactly what are you asking? for,
Absolutely.
How is it, what it will do, and how
Absolutely.
is that
Thank you for the
different?
time. Absolutely. So right now we are asking for $235,000 as a expansion to our service area. I showed you that service area map at the beginning. This expansion would include this bottom half of Windsor County, Windham County in its entirety, and all 3 counties in the Northeast Kingdom. That's a big bite, right? It's also a lot of geography. So what we looked at when we ran the numbers was we could either hire up or we could find partners. And being home share, of course, we wanted to share. So what we did is went looking for partners, and we did this in both areas. And what we came up with was a really nice partnership that's coming together with the Northeast Kingdom Council on Aging. Meg Burmeister has been a terrific partner so far in this, and the Windham Windsor Housing Trust. And what we will be doing with them is we will be sharing employees, and that saves quite a lot of money for us. It means that we will be able to insert 2 part-time case managers in the Northeast Kingdom, 1 part-time case manager in Windham County, and 1 full-time intake and reception person in South Burlington. The reason for that full-time person is we're going to expect a lot more applications to come in. We're going to expect a lot more phone calls to come in. And right now, our marketing and outreach person, which is a big part of how we make this work, is also answering the phone and taking all the inquiries and doing all the intake. And that's not really a sustainable way for that job to continue. And so this allows us to grow that position and allows us to move that outreach person where they belong, which is out doing things, kind of like this all over the place. It also involves a lot more marketing and advertising costs because as intuitive as it might seem after you hear me talk for 15 minutes, it's not something that someone thinks about right away. Like I'm having a hard time at home. Maybe I should have someone move in. It takes time. It takes some massaging. It takes some understanding. It takes neighbors talking to neighbors about it. It takes friends talking to friends. So it's kind of a lot of marketing in a different region when we open it up. So I will say that as we evolve, we expect that marketing number to come down and the case management hours to go up. And so that's what we're working on right now with Wyndham Windsor. We just had a conversation yesterday about a tiered sort of grow up of that part-time hours. We're doing it right now this way for a variety of reasons. One of them is it saves taxpayers lots and lots of money because we don't need to set up satellite offices. We don't need to set up full-time benefits for new employees. We don't need to create new positions for them to go and land in and also learn a new territory. These are people who are working in that territory, working with that clientele. They save a ton of training time because they're there working with these people already. So that's sort of the ask in a nutshell. I do want to make some time if there's questions, though. I think I have a little more.
Are there questions?
Yeah, I'm curious.
By the way, just so you know, I just sent to all of you by email. I forwarded Connor's email to me and Golly, which has the detail of what they're asking.
Thank you.
How does that relationship work now becoming a landlord tenant, if you will?
Yeah.
Do you become
No,
is the homeowner?
technically the homeowner is that we are in landlord tenant and technically the homeowner is the landlord. Right now, because it's owner occupied, like the owner lives in that space, it's their primary residence, they would fall into that category technically. Our agreement kind of pushes a little more than that. It gives them 30-day notice instead of 15. That's, I think, where the rubber meets the road for a lot of this stuff. But it's the kind of thing that upfront is discussed pretty clearly. And if there's a situation that is feeling a little more spicy than that, we will often step in and make an arrangement that will make that kind of easier, more comfortable.
They do fall into that.
Yes, yes.
If I had another, but it's not coming to me right now.
It's all right. It's totally great.
Any other questions by the committee? Connor, 1,000 thank yous.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And come let me know if there's anything you have questions about. My information should be on the back there somewhere, at least our office number's on the back there somewhere, and you have my email, I think now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
I think we are going to take a